Chicken.
What's up everyone, and welcome to another Behind the Mask video where each video I speak with a speedrunner to learn more about them and the game that they have done blindfolded, with the goal to help anyone learn more about blindfolded speedruns. As I know when people first watch a blindfolded speedrun, they're a bit skeptical of how a blindfolded speedrunner is doing it and probably assumes that it's fake. And I hope that with these videos, it does not eliminate skepticism, but help tell the difference between a real or fake blindfolded speedrun. And real quick, a shout out to the blindfolded speedrunning community. If you would like a good website to find blindfolded speedruns, then go to blindfoldedgaming.com, where you can see the most recent verified speedruns of blindfolded speedruns, as well as a catalog of games done blindfolded and the runners who did them blindfolded. For today's guest, I have someone who does new Super Mario Bros. Wii blindfolded, and he has also performed in a couple marathons as well as is an instrumental multitasker, which I think is incredibly impressive. So would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much for the intro. I'm FunkopotamusWes, or you can just call me Wes, and like Blazing Phoenix said, I do blindfolded speedruns, as well as other gaming challenges, such as playing instruments and then playing the game at the same time using handless controls. We'll get more into that later, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I'm super excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for agreeing to participating and giving me your time to make this video. Um, Normally I ask a different question first, but I want to do this one instead. Where did your username come from? Because I'm very interested in how that came about.
Very fitting, because I'm wearing a Toe Jam and Earl shirt here. And Funkopotamus is a reference to a character in Toe Jam and Earl called Lamont the Great Funkopotamus. And I don't know, a few years ago I just was trying to come up with a username to use on Minecraft. And I settled with FunkopotamusWes. And it kind of stuck.
It's definitely a unique username, and I doubt that you ever have issues with using it on other websites, correct?
Yeah. The only downside is a lot of people think it has to do with Funko Pops,
Mm-hmm.
which like nothing wrong with Funko Pops, but it's not what I was going for.
Yeah, that's what I initially thought, but I think there was a stream where someone also asked the same question. You explained it, but then I didn't remember what the answer was. But I remember that it didn't deal with Funkos, despite them having the similar name. And outside of speedrunning, what other hobbies do you have? Or I guess outside
I
of video games in general.
Yeah, outside of video games. Um I do a lot of music. I like to write music and play instruments, which ties into the video game challenges as well. And then I like I go outside a lot and play with my dog. Sometimes I go frisbee golfing. Um and just hanging out with friends.
And I think there was
Those
a
are the main things.
yeah. As we said with the instrument multitasker, you do like a piano with some of your speed runs, but I think it was GDQ, you said the piano wasn't your main instrument. Is that correct?
That is correct. I started way back in like the beginning of middle school with saxophone in band class, and I have since dabbled with a lot more than just saxophone. Eventually, I switched to bassoon being my primary, um, and I've learned a lot of the basics for most wind instruments, as well as I have a bass guitar in the back, which I'm currently trying to learn a little more of. But the instrument I play the most now is piano.
And by chance, do you remember what got you into video games and what your first video game was?
I've been playing video games as far back as I can remember. Um, so what got me into it? Probably my family. I have three siblings who are all gamers as well. And I want to say one of the first video games I remember playing had to be, we had a Wii, and I think before we got the Wii, we played my uncle's Wii, and he had Wii Sports. I remember Wii Sports, and then I also remember once we got our Wii, my parents downloaded some of like the old Mario games, SMB 1, 2, and 3. And then we would visit my grandma's house, and my uncle also has a whole bunch of other retro consoles like the NES, GameCube, N64, Sega Genesis, the original Xbox. So I was very fortunate enough. I'm 2003, born in 2003, but I had all the opportunity to play games that are way older than me. So that's what got me into it.
And so, with the amount of video games that you've played, do you have a favorite or a few favorites that are kind of tied as your favorite?
I wouldn't say I have a favorite. I think I say this a lot, but picking favorites is just so hard. There's so many good options, and like the best thing I can do is just enjoy them all as much as I can and leave it at that. But
That's
I did
understandable.
mention Minecraft earlier. I've played Minecraft for like ever since was in it came out in like 2012 era, I think.
Somewhere around there, I
So
believe.
I played that game for a long time, and I've since been returning to a lot of old games that I've played, um, such as New Super Mario Bros. Wii, which we'll talk about. I Part of the reason I like gaming challenges so much is it's a great way to re-enjoy nostalgic games in a new context. I'm very much someone who doesn't really play a game multiple times. Like if I beat a game once, I don't really go back to it to play it casually again. If I return to a game, I want to make it more interesting for myself.
Yeah, I typically, if I really like the game, I'll wait a year or two and then play it again. And then after some time, I do also want to challenge myself, either do 100% or see if I can do with the restriction of less items, less levels, or anything like that. And then eventually, if I really like it and want a next step, I think that's where speedrunning comes in. Is already now I've expert beat it at a steady pace. Let's see how fast I can beat it at a faster pace. And do you know what got you into speedrunning?
I actually wasn't really into speedrunning for a long time. I think it was around like 3 or 4 years ago I started getting into watching like speedrunning content. Not so much speedruns themselves, but like videos explaining speedruns, such as like world record progressions
Mm.
or explaining the tricks involved, and interested in speedrunning. And then it wasn't until I discovered Bubsy doing blindfolded speedruns that I really started to actually watch speedruns. Because I thought the blindfolded was, I came across the 120 star run, and I just watched the whole 11-hour thing, trying to pick up on like how he was doing certain things, and it was just super interesting. And around the same time of me doing or discovering blindfolded, I was also already already doing like video game instrument multitasking things, but not speed runs. I was just starting off with uh smaller little challenges. I was actually inspired by one random video on YouTube of a guy playing DK Summit on Mario Kart Wii, except he had the Wii remote on his forehead, and then he was playing the music on the piano while steering. And ever since I saw that video in high school, I um gradually started finding ways to mix instruments and video games. I started with like Wii Fit because Wii Fit you stand on the board, and that's how you control the
Mhm.
game, just by like shifting your balance and stuff. So I'm like, that's a great way to have your hands free to play the music. So I started with like saxophone, doing like the step aerobics with a saxophone, or the table tilt, or the tightrope. So I started with like small little like ILs, I would say, and then eventually I got into the Mario Kart. And when I got into the Mario Kart, I took it from Mario Kart Wii, which is what the original guy did, Acme Gone. Shout out to Acme Gone. Um, I took it to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, with the same concept, except without a Wii remote. It's a little Joy-Con, which is a lot easier to put on your head.
Mhm.
And as I got into doing that, I started I started to take it more seriously, considering like how do I build my vehicle to give myself the best chances of playing the game well, because you're limited with what you can do with just a controller on your head. We're lucky enough that Mario Kart has the tilt controls, so you could only steer left and right, or eventually I got into like shaking my head to do tricks, and then if I wanted to use an item, I had to have a hand free to like press the button. And so I was very limited with what I could do with the controls, which is why the build of the cart mattered. Because if you don't have the ability to drift, you need a vehicle that can uh,
Mhm.
turn sharply. So I would use inward drifting vehicles, and I would really think about the lines, the driving lines, all while still trying to get better at playing the piano, building up muscle memory. Because like it, I'm not gonna deny it was very difficult to play the music and the game well, but gradually as I got better, it left me room to think more seriously about how I could play the game better. And eventually I started streaming on TikTok, and I had some viewers who were like sharing ideas like maybe you could have a second Joy-Con that you can press buttons with more easily so that you can drift. Um, and it still had the same problem. I needed my hands free. So I'm like, the only way that could work is if we take the second Joy-Con and put it on my foot. And I did some testing, and it actually wasn't a bad idea. And I got it to work. Um, I eventually got used to it. I got really good at Mario Kart, playing with my head and my foot and the piano. And since that was so successful, I decided maybe there's a way I can use the same idea with more games. And the first game that came to mind was New Super Mario Bros. Wii, because it's a 2D platformer, which is nostalgic for me, and has a soundtrack that I thought I was capable of learning on the piano. And I was able to figure out how to set up custom controls on emulator, and I started learning a speed run. My goal was I wanted to try to beat the game,
Mhm.
and that's what really got me into speedrunning, was trying to make this crazy multitasking challenge possible to do a full run. And around the same time of me, like, I think it took around 3 months of learning the music and practicing the individual levels for any percent. There's about 15 or 16, I think, levels, depending on what you consider a level. There's about that many in the run, and it took me about 3 months to prepare all of that. But in the middle of me preparing that speed run, Bubsy released the 16-star tutorial for Blindfolded. And so I started learning that at the same time as me learning the piano run. So it all happened so quickly, but I started doing blindfolded runs and the multitasking runs around, like, it's around 2 years ago. Like a little, like 2.5 years ago is when I started learning, I think. So that's what got me into speedrunning.
I feel like you've done a fair amount for someone who just started. To me, it sounds like you just started speedrunning because I've been doing it off and on for over a decade. You've done like New Super Mario Brothers Wii with the piano and with the blindfold. You've done was it No World 5, I think for both as
Yes.
well. Or is it just the blindfold you've done No World
Yes.
5?
I did for the piano, I did any percent. I did low percent. I did No World 5 and I did Canonless. And I was planning to do 100% at some point, and it might still happen. We'll see. And then for blindfolded, I've so far done any percent and any percent No World 5, and plans to do more, for sure.
And it hasn't even just been New Super Mario Brothers World. You've done or Wii. You've done SM64 on the DS. I think you've been doing SM64 Nintendo 64 version, and then you even dabbled in a Call of Duty Easter egg.
Yep. That was the Call of Duty East Black Ops 3, the giant Easter egg for zombies. That was a fun little side project. It was funny because I was playing zombies just kind of casually on stream, and naturally people know that I do blindfolded speedruns, and so they started asking, "When are you gonna do this blindfolded?" Which is like the classic comment
Hmm.
that people give when you are playing a new game. Now this, do that blindfolded. And I know it was a joke, but it got me thinking, what if like a map as simple as the giant, you can do it all in the first round. Yeah, I'm not really a big first person shooter player, but I love the zombies mode because it's PvE,
Hmm.
player versus environment, and zombies is just, it's really satisfying to me. And the Easter eggs are like really big puzzles that require skill to survive and do the puzzles. They're pretty cool, and the speedrun community for Easter eggs is crazy. They're The zombies community in general is very smart. They're really cool. I'm sure you've known, like, you when you consider which games to do blindfolded, there's some games that like that's just not going to work. There's
Hmm.
no point in even really investigating that. And zombies is one of those games. The only thing that made me want to look into it was because of that one map, because the Easter egg is so short and so simple. It was kind of just a bonus map, I think. You can do it all in the first round, which means it gets rid of the main problem, which is surviving
Hmm.
random zombies. All you have to do is leave one alive at the first round and then try to do everything. So that was a fun little side project, and it got some other people interested, and it kind of became a collaboration to try to figure it out.
Yeah, I thought it was incredibly impressive, especially because I knew that you were doing New Super Mario Brothers Wii, so you got a 2D platformer that you can use music to help or other sound cues, and then you just switch to a 3D PvE thing where you're gonna have to survive zombies. And then when I watched the video and I saw it was an Easter egg you could do, like you said on the round one, I'm like, okay, that makes way way more sense than doing
And
room
just
after room after
surviving.
room. Yeah. So I'm like, that is still a cool concept, and the fact that there was a map that could allow that, but then it made me wonder, could other people do other FPS games blindfolded? But since I don't know enough about first person shooter games in general, I don't have the mindset of how something could be more viable. But then I've seen I saw Minecraft was ran. I was curious how people
Yeah.
did that, and I saw that they played on PC and had something set up where they can just tap, and it's just like turns their
Yeah, the
camera.
number pad, they use the number pad to look around. I was looking into that when I started the zombies, because like a 3D first person game, if I could get something set up like that to look around in zombies, then I could build off of that. But I ended up not being able to get something to work. But I discovered something else instead. Like the one thing that made it possible was looking through the controls and looking around in the camera controls. They have you can turn off free look, which means the mouse can only look side to side. Whatever Y level you're looking at, you can only look side to side. And then like if I can move the mouse a little bit, knowing that it's only going one direction, you can kind of normalize your angle by knifing the wall. So if you knife and you don't hear the wall, you have to be positioned in a corner
Mhm.
first or against a wall. You knife, you can't hear the wall. You move the mouse slightly to the right, you knife again, and you just repeat that until you hit the wall. And that's how you can normalize your looking angle. And then in order to look up and down, you can use the arrow keys or any key on your keyboard. And then you can also set a keybind to center view, which if you're looking up, you hit the center view button, it immediately snaps you back to a normalized position, which is parallel with the ground. It's only because of those controls that made it possible. So
That's
always
nice.
always look through the controls if you're gonna route a game blindfolded.
That does sound very useful. So, you, like I was saying, for short time of the doing, in my opinion, short time doing speedruns, and it sounds like you've done a lot. And another thing that I've really liked from your stuff is the fact that you have your own website as well. And I saw that in your website you had like a tab for like blindfolded resources or something, and it had like, here's a general idea of what to look for blindfolded speedrun. Here's what normalizing mean, beat counting means, and all these demonstrations. I'm like, I like that there was an easy spot to go to see all these information that new people probably didn't know about, and then helps them understand blindfolded speedruns better.
Yeah, I one of the things I discovered when streaming and making content is like I really value the education side of things, especially if I'm going to be sharing all of these hobbies online. I should try to take responsibility in providing good resources, um, especially because I started with the video game multitasking, and when people show up to my stream randomly on TikTok, you get a lot of new people who are just like scrolling, and it's hard for them to quickly catch on what's going on, especially if they can't even see that there's a Joy-Con on my foot. So I started having like a video pinned on my profile that explains everything. And then when I started going into blindfolded gaming streams, I tried to adapt the same idea and just like because I can't lie. I It does get annoying saying the few things over and over again. So rather than me having to do that, why don't I just make a video and then all I have to say is go watch the video.
Mm-hmm.
And then it clears up a lot of misconceptions because I'm sure you know there's a lot of misconceptions. And like behind the mask stands for exactly what I stand for is like there is a lot of false stuff on the internet and you don't want to completely get rid of the skepticism.
Mm-hmm.
You just need to be more familiar and educated on the stuff so that you can tell the difference. So probably could have worded that better, but
No,
I
I
think you get
understood
the
it.
idea.
And like I said, I really like how yours is short but easy to understand. And where I'm coming from with the behind the mask is I wanted to show like individual games of because you can't make it's kind of hard to do a tutorial for every game unless every blindfolded speedrunner did that. But I'm hoping that if I have a variety of games where runners come on and explain it, then like New Super Mario Brothers Wii and Celeste are two different 2D platformers, but can share similar ideas or strategies, and also show that all of us are just gamers who just wanted to do blindfolded speedruns. We don't need photographic memory. We don't need hundreds of
Yeah.
hours of practice. It's just, to me, it's almost like learning a song, but in a different way.
Yeah. It's like, it's actually, I would almost say, because I have experience writing music and playing music, strategizing is like composing. And then like practicing and learning the strategy once you've made it is like learning the piece of music. Um, I always describe blindfolded gaming as solving a puzzle.
Hmm.
It's like you get the same enjoyment out of like doing Sudoku puzzles. It's you have to like use logic and figure things out. Um, except this is a puzzle that wasn't designed to be solved.
Hmm.
We're turning this into a puzzle that didn't already exist. Um, and not only that, but it's a puzzle about video games. And us gamers, we already have an interest in video games. We're just expanding that interest into um, blindfolded gaming or challenge runs or speed running itself. Like we all like casual gaming, but speed running is even different than that. Like I I personally like I would do casual gaming for the sake of doing casual gaming. I would do speed running because I want to do speed running. They're different activities that we do for different reasons, but they just they're it's still related to video games. Same piece of media, different ways to enjoy it.
And I think with the taking it to another level of blindfolded, it's just giving me another excuse to play a game that I like, but relearning it. You think you
Yeah.
know it, and then you put on the blindfold. You're like, I actually don't. I don't know where I am. And you open the blindfold, and you're like, I didn't even know that corner existed because I haven't ever ran into it before. But then, like you said, it's like turning it into a puzzle, and then unintentionally taking what the game developers put in the game and using it to your best advantage. Like with Runner Guy, we were talking about all the sound cues that you can do in Ocarina of Time, as well as all the movement options, help make that game viable for blindfolded. And you got different walls with different noises. You got different floors with different noises. Link can side hop, backflip, roll, and those all help with specific movements. Celeste, I've been playing recently and spoke with Malik Bell. Climbing on a metal wall makes a different noise than climbing on a stone wall. Running on metal makes a different noise than snow. There's so many sound cues that can help you do it blindfolded. It's just memorizing the layout, doing what you have as your solution to the puzzle, and then if something goes wrong, hopefully with your experience you can fix it, and if you fail, you take off the blindfold, learn from the mistake, and now you have something extra to help with being more consistent at solving the puzzle. And I find that super fun and interesting. And with Kingdom Hearts, even I thought this big 3D RPG will never be viable blindfolded. And then of course, Bubsy had to prove me wrong and beat all of Kingdom Hearts blindfolded. And then when I went into it thinking, how did he do this? And I started doing it myself. I'm like, oh, okay. Now I understand how this game actually functions stupid well for blindfolded outside of combat, because Sora's with his big feet makes noises. He has a consistent roll. Each room is kind of small, and there's not like a lot of obstacles to go around, and so you just roll forward 4 times, roll left 3 times, and now you're done with that room, and you just like, okay, this makes far more sense than I thought it would. And I just find the whole concept of every game that everyone has done blindfolded on blindfolded gaming.com is just all impressive to me. Even after the games that I've done, I'm always impressed with everything that everyone does and find it super fun to watch.
Yeah, there's always so many different ways or different games with different challenges, and like you might not know how something is possible in or if it is possible if it hasn't been done yet until you start learning more about it or investigating. Um, like the more you learn, the more it makes sense, which is, you know, you could say that about lots of things in life. uh, but even something I've been dabbling in recently too is Super Mario Galaxy. For the longest time, we've all just been like, yeah, this is probably not really a good, viable blindfolded game. But the community right now, we're all kind of contributing in the blindfolded Mario Galaxy to prove that it could be possible. And it wasn't until we all started like actually investigating it that we started to realize just how doable a lot of things are. Even like pointing at the screen. I even made use of this for Mario Galaxy because pointing at the screen, you want to one be able to find where your pointer is, and I discovered that the Wii menu, if you hit the Wii menu, you can use not only do you pause the game, which is kind of overpowered, but you can use that time to line up the cursor with the home menu buttons. And then once you line up, I use this to stabilize the pointer as much as you can because you got to keep it steady and line up the cursor and then unpause the game and you have the cursor in whatever spot that you um, can find use for, I guess. But it wasn't until we started actually investigating that we discovered that a lot of things can be possible with that as a tool.
So with the
So
Wii menu, it makes a noise when you like hover over a certain
yeah,
thing, correct?
and all of the buttons they make the same sound. It's just the
Hmm.
clicking sound. So you kind of have to find your way through the menu, like let's say I'm in the top right. There's a click here, and then you keep going down, and there's a click here. So that's only 2 clicks. And if I move left and I go do the same thing, and I hear 3 clicks, I'm like, okay, so I went from probably here to somewhere in the middle where there's the 3 buttons in a row. Or if I do it and I hear no clicks, I'm like, okay, I'm too far. I'm off the screen. So you kind of have to find your way through the menu, which you got to really lock in sometimes,
Hmm.
but you get better at it.
I do think it's cool that but a lot of members of the community are trying to tackle Super Mario Galaxy, and I even saw Bubsy a video talking about that. And at first, I thought it's just another 3D Mario game. What makes it so different? Because I've actually never played Galaxy, but then when I watched his video and saw the explanations of a lot of stuff, like the how the camera can be weird on certain 3D worlds and how you have to point the
Yeah,
cursor to get those bits to do stuff. I was like, oh, that makes a lot more sense why this seems challenging. And it'll be cool if once that whole project is finished, because I have confidence that unless it's already been beaten blindfolded, has that been finished yet, or is everyone still working on trying to get a completion of the game?
we're I think we're around halfway to routing a full theoretical any%. We'll say a community segmented run. Whether a full run is done in one sitting by one person, I don't know if that's going to happen, but that's not my goal.
Hmm.
If that happens, it won't be me.
One
Um,
one thing I've learned in speedrunning is never say it's never going to happen, because I feel like speedrunners or gamers in general always find a way.
especially with like 19-hour plus runs.
Hmm.
Crazy.
Yeah, I don't know how Bubsy did his 11-hour plus of a 120 star, or Crystal Saver with his 10 plus hour runs. I think the longest I've gone blindfolded is 2.5, and that was with testing up Kingdom Hearts stuff. And was so worn out by the end of that.
Yeah, I think the most I've done is around 4 hours, which was uh Super Mario 64 DS, the 50 star. No, it wasn't 50 star. It was all characters run, which is basically 50 star with the addition of unlocking Wario. Um, and most of that run, or most of the time, was just being stuck on Bowser at the end. So, but to segue back into New Super Mario Bros. Wii, because I know that's kind of what we want to focus on today,
Hmm.
is uh, we were kind of talking about, like, you said Super Mario Galaxy. You've never played it, but like it's just another 3D Mario game. How can it be that much different? And one thing I've discovered is like all it takes is one little thing in
Hmm.
a game to make it like not possible to do blindfolded. Um, New Super Mario Bros. Wii is possible. Um, but New Super Mario Bros. U, we don't know if it's possible yet. But there is one level in that game which I'm pretty sure is unavoidable. I haven't really investigated that game much yet. But there's one level that I think is unavoidable, but it's a super RNG heavy boss fight with Kamek. And very recently I was able to conquer Kamek in New Super Mario Bros. Wii, which is probably the most RNG heavy boss fight in that game. So maybe New Super Mario Bros. U, if we can figure that out, we can try to make that game possible. When you're starting to route a game, like all it takes is one thing, one barrier or challenge that is so like complicated or impossible, and then the whole run is just not
Hmm.
possible. Um, Even Super Mario 64 DS, I didn't really have much speedrunning knowledge of that game. I got into it um, immediately going into the mindset of like discovering if it's possible blindfolded. And I did a little bit of research seeing which glitches are required for certain categories, and I settled with 8 star. And the first thing I did, I didn't learn any stars. I just went straight to trying to learn the glitches and seeing, okay, how can I make a blindfolded setup that can do this? And because I didn't want to waste a lot of time trying to do something that ends up not
Hmm.
being possible. I wanted to tackle the trickier stuff to see if it's worth continuing forward. And the first blindfolded game that I routed was New Super Mario Bros. Wii. And I remember going in with the same mindset. I discovered a video on YouTube, and it was blindfolded New Super Mario Bros. Wii is almost possible. That's what the video was. And it was talking about like all the levels that they were able to complete or have been completed, and what levels they thought that were gonna be a problem, and just discussing what the problems were. And I was watching that video, and some of the videos they said were probably gonna be a problem. I already had some ideas of how we could conquer them because of my experience doing Super Mario 64, um, which I learned through Bubsy's tutorial. So with my experience from that, I thought I could try to finish off the work that has been done with New Super Mario Bros. Wii. Some of the levels being like the 5-4 raft, which the raft, for those who don't know, is it moves. It's kind of like an auto scroller. The raft moves through the level, and you need to ride the raft. But there's five. It can hold up to 5 entities, excluding Mario, like coins or enemies. And if it gets too much on it, the raft stops. And there's all these enemies that fall from above. So there's a if you're playing the game casually, depending on when you load the enemies in, when you uh, where you go, when you jump, and like coins falling down, uh, you will get, or like the items from the item block. Depending on everything you do, you get like infinite variation in the raft. And it just so happens that the visual speedrunners do a trick called raft skip where they just fly through the whole level, doing all this platforming and parkour. And when I saw that video, I'm like, oh yeah, we could probably just beat count this. Let me try to figure that out. And that's the first thing I learned before I got in contact with the Blindfolded NSMBW community, which um, once I reached out to the visual speedrunners asking if anyone had done blindfolded stuff, turns out there was a whole Discord server for it, and um, a full run hadn't been done yet, but almost every level required for any percent had already been proven possible, except for the Bowser at the end. It was Bowser and 8-1 with the RNG meteors falling from the sky. 8-1 had been done blindfolded using 2 stars and dying at the checkpoint. So using a star at the beginning of the level, completing the first half, dying after the checkpoint, and then using a star, doing the second half of the level. There's still some RNG involved, but it had been proven, and they said that 8-1 needs some work, and Bowser hasn't been done yet. So, with that knowledge, those were the 2 things I started with. Trying to figure out what to do with those 2 levels, which again, I figured, why not just beat count everything? Like, beat countings in 2D games solves so many problems. If you know how to craft the beat count, I would say. I think crafting the beat count, though, making it, what I found with New Super Mario Bros. Wii is, like, creating the beat count takes a lot of, like, experience and knowledge sometimes. Like, and a lot of times the beat count incorporates other blindfolded techniques into it, such as an audio cue or normalization. Because, like, no matter what, we're human, we're not going to time everything perfectly. So how can I choose the right counts to minimize the amount of variation? Like, I could jump on count 4, but that means I'm jumping off of a slope. So there's like flat ground and then there's a slope down. If I jump here during the beat count, then I'm jumping off a slope. Slopes give you more speed. So if I jump off the slope and my timing isn't exactly perfect every time, there's going to be slight variations in how much speed I get, which then messes up the rest of the beat count. Because in a beat count, you hold run and you hold right, and a lot of times or most beat counts, that's what you do. You hold run, you hold right, and you just time the jumps and you time the spins. So, and the reason we can do that is because Mario's speed caps. So if he's always moving the same speed, then he will always be at the same spot relative to when you start the beat count. And so you kind of maintain normalization as long as you don't gain or lose speed. Going back to the slope, if you jump off of the slope at a different spot, you're going to get a different amount of speed. So why not just jump off of the flat ground instead? So if we move the counts to jump in places where you will always maintain the normalization, like, there's a lot of thought that goes into creating beat counts, even for a 2D game, which is really cool because when I got into doing blindfolded Mario Wii, after doing Super Mario 64, which is a 3D platformer, I thought, like, 2D platformers aren't going to be that interesting. Oh, I was wrong. There's actually so much so much that goes into it, and that's why I've stuck with it with so long, is because it's actually a lot of fun. So looking at 8-1, which is one of the big problems when routing that game, uh, because of the RNG meteors. I guess I should mention there is a save at the beginning of each world. So you get to save right before 8-1, which is amazing. It's actually kind of funny. There's a save but before like almost every tricky level in that game. So 5-4 with the raft skip, you need a propeller. You need a propeller to do the raft skip. And you don't have many propellers. You're limited with that item. But if you get to save right before 5-4, then you have unlimited attempts because you can reload the save to get your item back and try again. It's the same thing with 8-1. You get to save right before, so we're not limited with items. If we stop at the Toad House at the beginning, after level 2, there's you get guaranteed you get at least 1 mushroom, you get 2 fire flowers, you get 2 ice flowers, and you get either 2 propellers or you get a propeller and a star. So that's the only variation in all the patterns. Maybe we'll talk about the Toad House later. But the point is you are guaranteed all of these items if you use the Toad House, which means we can use those items to conquer 8-1. One of the main things I wanted to do when creating the speed count for 8-1 was go fast, because the less time we spend in the level, the less RNG we have to deal with. If we make it through quicker, we'll have to deal with less cycles of the rocks falling. And then number 2, if we damage boost, if we just take damage on purpose in the same spots, then the rocks don't matter in those moments because you have invincibility frames after you take damage. So there's not only is there random rocks falling, but another reason people think that level is difficult is because of all the platforming, all of the lava geysers, and there's also some enemies. But the lava geysers and the enemies we can take advantage of because they're gonna be consistent, unlike the rocks. Which means if we take damage by one of those things, it's gonna be consistent. Another thing I should mention is when you take damage in that game, the whole screen freezes. So, which makes playing that game on multiplayer kind of chaotic because if your friend takes damage and then the screen freezes, it messes you up. Um, it's amazing. But
Okay.
for blindfolded, it's kind of a problem for beat counting because if you take damage when you're not supposed to, you can't just keep going and do the same beat count because although the screen freezes, the music keeps going. So if you get stopped for a second and the music keeps going and you keep beat counting the same thing, it desyncs the music and your position, which is why it's so important to take damage in the same spot. Not only does it make it so that you can jump through more enemies and lava geysers after taking damage, but it also means that if you hit a rock in that moment, you avoid taking damage. If you take damage, for as long as the invincibility frames go, you're good to keep going with the beat count. So RNG, one of the biggest things you can try to do is mitigate as much of the RNG as possible. And that's the main thing we did in 8-1. And then another way we can do it for that specific level is because the rocks fall, they fall, I don't know how many seconds each cycle is, but they fall for a certain amount of time, and then there's like a grace period before the next set falls, but there's a consistent cycle. Like rocks fall here, then they don't fall, then they fall again, and because of that, we can control when the rocks fall by the time we reach a certain section of the level. So in the second half of 8-1, I will stop and normalize against a wall, and then I'll wait for a specific spot in the cycle. Like I wait for the rocks to fall, and then as soon as they stop spawning in, I start the next beat count. So that once I get later on into the level, when are the rocks falling? They're falling when I'm damage boosting, so they don't matter. So that was I was really proud of figuring that out. Do you have any questions right now before I move on?
Uh, I did. I was going to for 8-1 because I saw the run and saw that the meteors were falling and that you were intentionally taking damage boosts at the cost of your propeller. And I thought, man, how good would the propeller be for the rest of the run? And how bad are these meteors? But you pretty much summed it all up in that very well explanation. So I don't have a question for 8-1 anymore.
Yeah, now that you bring it up though, the propeller, we kind of use the propeller for most of the run.
Hmm.
Like we get a propeller in the first level, and then you keep that propeller until World 8. And maybe it might not be that exact propeller, because if you get propellers in the Toad House and then you lose the propeller, you can use one of your backup propellers.
Hmm.
So, but you use a propeller all the way up to World 8, and then you purposely lose it to damage boost. But in the early days, when I did the first few runs of Mario Bros. Wii, I didn't have as good strategies, and a lot of strategies I did use, such as like the roller coaster level 8-7 or 8-2 or 8 airship. I mean, a lot of the levels had already been done before, so my strategies that I made were inspired by strategies that have already been made by other people. So I went with the propeller for the rest of World 8. So 8-1 is the only level we don't use a propeller. But the good thing is, after you beat 8-1, you can just go back to World 1, play the first level again, and you get another propeller, and you can even get an extra 1-up. So you basically have unlimited propellers and lives for the rest of World 8 just by going back and playing through the first level again, which gets time consuming if you're not good and you aren't consistent at the levels, which I had to deal with early on. But World 5, we don't have that benefit because there are vines that move on the map of World 5. Luckily, in like normal speedruns, you don't really have to deal with that, because if you do everything without dying, the vines will always line up in a way where like you won't lose time, or like the cycle of the vines is the same every time. I think every single time you enter a level and die or complete a level, the vines move. And I think there's like 3 different positions that the vines can be in. So like if we go to 5 tower and we die, lose the propeller, and you have to try again, if I go back to World 1 and play through the first level to get another propeller, then go back to World 5, it puts me back at the beginning of World 5, except the vines might block my path to get back to that level, which means if I want to get back to that level, I have to play a level again to move the vines again. And I'm pretty sure there's a piranha plant battle on the map too, and I think if you leave and you go back, the piranha plant comes back. So you can't really go back to World 1 for more propellers in World 5, but you can in World 8. Um, and there's also the saves at the beginning of World 5 and after 5 Tower. So there is at least that. You don't have to do everything first try. If you want to maintain the propeller, you can do 5-1 through 5 tower, and then you get to save. But if you die anywhere in there, you can either use your backup propeller or you can reload the save and try again, which not great for a speed run,
Mhm.
but it's what I'm getting to is we have these saves and we have these propellers in World 8, or we can backtrack to World 1 to get them. So, although some of the tricks are tricky or inconsistent, New Super Mario's Wii is a super marathon safe speed run for blindfolded, which is awesome. Like, if I wanted to, every single run I start, I could finish it,
Mhm.
no doubt. Probably in under, let's say, under an hour and a half guaranteed. That's giving me like a lot of leeway because the Bowser fight is also pretty inconsistent. But the downside to the Bowser fight is you, at least now, maybe there's potential to do a no propeller strategy in the future, but at least for now, you need the
Mhm.
propeller to beat Bowser blindfolded. Um, and since you get to save right before Bowser's castle, which is amazing, you can either have one propeller that you're wearing from the airship level right before, plus 2 others in your inventory. But if you use one of those backup propellers earlier in the run, you will have even less. So you do Bowser's Castle, you get to the checkpoint, and then you go for Bowser. Which means if you die in Bowser, you can reload from the checkpoint and use one of your propellers. But you only have 2 extras at most. So you have 3 chances at Bowser before you have to reload the save and then play through the whole castle again. And the run has gotten to the point now where I skipped the Toad House in World 1. So if you want a chance at improving the record, you will only have one propeller.
Mhm.
So you have one chance at Bowser, and if you mess it up, you have to play through the whole castle again. So everything else in the run could be going great, but you could lose lots of time in Bowser's Castle because I think it takes around 6 minutes ish to do the full level blindfolded. So Bowser could lose a lot of time. Early on, when I was first routing Bowser, I tried so many different things to make the fireball section of the fight work. Um, I don't think it's RNG. I think you just have to be really precise. I should really do my research with the visual community at some point. Um, but Bowser like shoots fireballs, and you need to manipulate the fireballs to destroy the walls so that you can progress through the level. However, sometimes he shoots fireballs, sometimes he swings his arms or something, and unfortunately, you can't just beat count it because not only is his movements sometimes random, at least you can hear the difference between which moves he's doing. But you have to be really precise for those fireballs to give the same results. Because if the fireball hits in almost the same spot, but not quite, the way it breaks the wall isn't going to be exactly the same. So, what makes doing the fight the intended way really difficult for blindfolded is there's a lot of variation, and the environment itself is not going to be this exact same every time. Because if there's one extra block here, that might mess up your strategy. You can't exactly use the same strategy to navigate that, which is why the propeller is so ridiculously like useful in that fight because manipulating where the fireballs go, if you like like I'm trying to have him shoot a fireball into the top right corner, I can jump and spin, and that spin keeps me in that position for an extended time than just a normal jump, which means it's easier to time Bowser shooting the fireball there. And Bowser also doesn't always, he's not always going to be in the same position when he shoots the fireball, depending on when he moves forward versus when he shoots the fireballs. So the propeller minimizes the amount of variation, and it also makes navigating through a lot easier, because if you were to just jump through a gap, but the blocks aren't the same every time, you might get caught up on something. Whereas if you jump and spin through it, you'll more reliably make it through. You can also hear the fireballs kind of. You can roughly hear if they're like low or high, or left versus right. So based on where you hear the fireballs hit, you can kind of make a good decision of what to do next. But for the most part, the process for the strategy is the same, but how exactly you go about it changes, and even then it's not consistent. You can still take damage, and not to mention there's a Goomba randomly. And there's like two blocks, or two boxes, one on top of the other, and the top box has a Goomba. And in order to do the next section, which is a bunch of moving platforms, the only way you can really consistently make it through that next section is with a beat count. Probably you could beat count it without a propeller. But realistically, using a propeller is the best way to go about it. And luckily, there is an item block that has a propeller. So I need to beat count this next section with a propeller, which means I can either keep the propeller without taking damage. That rarely happens. Or I can take damage once and have a different beat count that I use to get the propeller in the block. If I take damage twice, I'm done for. So, but in order to do this beat count, I need to normalize. And I need to normalize before I start it. And it's really hard to do that when Bowser's destroying the environment, which is why I opted to go to the top box where the Goomba is. Because if I go on the bottom route, if I stay on the bottom, his fireballs are going to destroy the wall that I used to normalize. I need that wall to be there still, so I go up, and there's a chance the Goomba will hit me. If I don't land on the Goomba, there's a chance he will hit me. Or if I don't get hit by the Goomba, I can let Bowser's fireball hit me and the wall at the same time. So if I don't take damage, I prefer, if I don't take damage from the Goomba, I prefer to take damage from Bowser's fireball, because it makes making it through the last wall and normalizing more consistent. But if I do take damage from the Goomba, you kind of have to just react and time the jump so that Bowser's fireball hits above you, and then you can jump through. So this strategy was just a mess. It was really difficult. I think my first ever blindfolded run of this game, actually before I did my first completed run, I did an attempt that I didn't finish, and I think it was like 2 hours plus long, and half of the speedrun was just doing Bowser over and over. So it was not good. It was very inconsistent. But after doing like 2 full completed runs, I was fed up with it already, and actually no. I think I only ever did 1 completed run with this strategy, because I think the second run I did had the new strategy, which there just so happens to be a glitch that skips that one part of the Bowser fight. it's called ATC, Above the Castle, and it's so funny because the entire speedrun is pretty great. Like, I have no problems with it. It's just the one section, like specifically the fireball section of the second phase of the Bowser fight. Only that section. The platform section after it is fine. The Bowser section before it is fine. That one section, there just happens to be a glitch that skips that section and that section only. And so I said, I might as well just try to make this work, because if we can make this work blindfolded, this will be like one of the greatest speedruns. Or one of the most fun, I guess, blindfolded Mario speedruns. It requires the propeller still, which makes no difference. We already had to deal with that, but it's still inconsistent. It's a lot easier, but it's way more consistent than what I was doing. Because the beginning of the fight requires you to spin at a precise time in the music. Because like I said, the fireballs, it's really hard for you to get the same results from the fireballs hitting the wall. And in order to do this glitch, you need the fireball to hit exactly so that the hole that it makes leaves a 1 block gap on the edge so that you can crouch jump into the 1 block gap. And since Mario is 2 blocks tall, you can only fit into it if you're crouching. So if you crouch jump into it and then you get as far into the gap as you can, if you release the crouch button, the game tries to push you out. It tries to push you out of the, either to the left or the right, depending on where you are. You want to get far enough in so it pushes you to the right. But if you just let go, it pushes you back in bounds. If you stop crouching and then start crouching again and spam the jump button, you can clip up into the ceiling. And from there, you can run across and go to the platform section, which we need to beat count. But in order to normalize, we don't really have an opportunity to normalize, so you can't see this happen in the speed run because it's all out of bounds, but as you can hear it. As soon as I'm spamming jump to get up into the ceiling, I start shaking the Wii remote. So as soon as the game lets me, as soon as I get high enough up, the game lets me spin immediately. And if I hold crouch, like down right, that's one of the, oh, I haven't talked about normalized movement in this game yet, but crouch jumping, you can hold down right, and you're like standing in one spot. You hold down right, you do a full jump, you'll always travel the same distance and come to a stop in the same spot. Same with spinning. If you're holding crouch and you spin, you will land in the same spot. And you have different options based on if you're holding the run button or not, or some semi-normalized versions where if you do a jump and a spin. But right here, we're spinning as soon as I can, and if I hold crouch, then I will stop in the same spot. So you kind of get normalization above, and then you can beat count the rest of the way. So those were like the main things that were difficult to conquer in this game. But a lot of the other levels, they're just a mix of beat counting and like normalized movement, audio cues. I'll let you take it away now.
No, that was really good. I saw that the Bowser section looked the toughest. I didn't realize how complex it actually was, but I had an idea that it was definitely difficult because one, you got to do the glitch that I know it's in your run. Whenever you do the glitch, there would be like 4 people who just in chat how
Yeah.
figuring out how you clip through that, and then the fact that you're maneuvering through this section with a bunch of moving platforms. Bowser's chasing you, and you have like the lava creating waves that are coming towards you. I'm just like, this
Yeah.
looks a little difficult visually, let alone blindfolded, and um, I can't imagine how much more difficult it would be without the propeller than with it. But and then
Yeah.
I think it's one of those games that it does seem more apparent that it's a lot of beat counting and normalization, and not like you getting in a spot, then you do like 500 things to then do one little trick. It looks like you just run into a wall, and then you can you're counting out loud,
Yeah.
so then it helps everyone know that you're beat counting. Uh, I think one of the levels that I found more fun to watch, and I don't know if it's like a difficult level or not, but it's 5-2 because you'll be running through it, and then all of a sudden you're just like bouncing on all the wigglers' heads as you're
Yeah.
running through that level. And for
We love the Wigglers.
it looks like they're always
The
gonna hit you, and you're just bouncing through all of them. I'm like, this just looks so cool to watch.
Yeah, the hitboxes on the Wigglers are very forgiving. Um, I was gonna ask you, talking about, because we're talking about a 2D game, and you've done both 2D and 3D
Hmm.
as well, since you're working on Celeste, I know, and I'm sure you've done other things. Because I get a lot of people asking me, like, or they assume that 3D games, because they're 3D, are going to be harder and more complex to do blindfolded than a 2D game. And I personally, I'm like, I wouldn't say anyone is harder than the other. They're challenging in their own ways. Um, but do you have any input on that?
From the little that I've done, I think this also helps me that I played more 3D games than 2D, but I found that I have more room and more options to work with on 3D games than a 2D game. It feels like I can either run straight, or I can go left and then straight, or I can do a mix of both. Uh, Whereas 2D games, you have to get to this point, so you're gonna have to go right and up at some point, and then
Yeah,
almost mandatory beat counting for a lot of spots. And I'm not good at beat counting, so with the 3D game having more options to find my way around, it I think helps. The only thing that I could see being a little more difficult, and it depends on the 3D game, is say, like for my example of Kingdom Hearts, boss fights can be a little bit annoying. Uh,
yeah,
or say you have to do a mandatory fight and then progress from there. You don't want your camera turning while you're fighting, which could be a little tricky. Whereas a 2D game, your camera is going to be in this a locked position. So then you just got to figure out how can you hit it while blindfolded. So it's like movement wise, 3D seems easier, but when you're battling, it just depends on the fight and what game you're playing.
yeah. I mean, it always depends on the game itself. Each game is different. Um, I found that, like, if you think about it, 2D games, if you look at playing a 2D game with eyes and then a 3D game with eyes, and where blindfolded lies, like what is required to beat a game with eyes for both, and then how does blindfolded relate to that? For 2D games, I feel like what you need to be able to do blindfolded for a 2D game is more closely it's it's a lot closer to what is required when you're playing with eyes. Like the movement, like there's less ways to cheese it, I think.
Hmm.
Like there's no way to, like when you have a 2D game, you have to go through all of this. You can't go around it. Like all of these obstacles that were designed for visual gameplay, you have to make it through all of that. You I think there's a lot more, yeah, like I said, you have to, the things you do blindfolded have to be closer to what you have to do with eyes in a 2D game. I think it's the best way I could describe it.
Yeah, to me, it feels way more restricted than a 3D game, and you can even like use camera angles to help. So let's say
Yeah,
you enter a room and you try it one way, and you're like, I just am not finding a good spot to get through this. Then you find, but if I go here and I can set my camera up this way, now it's far easier to get through this room than the first attempt. Whereas 2D games is like you're kind of screwed if
yeah,
certain rooms you're gonna have to tackle it one way or a couple different. Like Celeste, I like that. I have different ways I can get through the room, but it's still the challenge of you still gonna have to get to the end, so you're still gonna have to jump over this spike pit, or you're gonna have to jump over these moving obstacles, and you might be able to get around these other 80% of the obstacles, but there's still that locked 20% you gotta get through. Whereas 3D games, I feel like there's a lot less you have to get around if given the right space. And a lot of 3D games, you get a lot of space to get around that stuff very well.
but for 3D games, you do have to deal with a lot more, like
Mm-hmm.
controlling the camera. So there's a trade-off: the simplicity of 2D games and their controls versus the complexity of the level design, and then the opposite with a 3D game. The controls are a lot more complex, but the options you have for the level and navigating it are much greater.
And if you make a mistake in a 3D game, I feel it's more detrimental than in a 2D game.
Yeah.
I also think newer games typically are a little tend to be easier for blindfolded than older games just because they have more sound, sound cue,
Yeah, the
audio
sound
stuff.
design is great.
They tend to be more fluid with controls, whereas old games,
Yeah.
like Celeste, they have a little window room of jumping. You can walk off the ledge, and there's like still a little bit of time where you can still do your jump. Whereas older games, you walk off that ledge, you're just falling. You can't jump, and
Yeah.
a lot of older games, you also can't move while you're in the air. So if you were already momentum going to the right, you're committing going to the right. Whereas newer games, you jump, you hold right, and you're like, oh, let me change that, and you can still move midair. And
Yeah, I've
the
never thought about that. Like the fluidity of the controls, I guess.
Nintendo World
I think
Championship playing a variety of NES games, going from Mario 3, which feels good, and then Ice Climbers that it's awful. It's like, oh, there's a big difference in these two games.
the only downside I would say with newer games is like, and I'm no expert on this. I know I'm going to use Mario Odyssey as an example, especially if we're like when games aren't really designed to be
Mm-hmm.
played with like notch controllers. Like Nintendo Switch just has a joystick. Um, but like any games with like full 360 joystick moving,
Mm-hmm.
whereas like or even like Super Mario 64 versus Super Mario 64 DS. It's a DS game. It's meant to be played like you have a D-pad, so it's 8 directional movement, which is great for blindfolded and normalization. And then you have a full 360. Like there's all those in between angles you can get, which can be harder to deal with. And I think for Mario Odyssey, some of the blindfolded runners for that game, like they have like custom notches on their controller or something. But like even then, because of how the game was made, there's still like a lot of like variations in the direction you move or like how the camera behaves, um which like making the new games so like fluid and like dynamic, I should say, kind of makes navigating 3D space more difficult. And I
Mm-hmm.
know one of the things they did to get around that for blindfolded is they moved the camera so it's like facing straight down on Mario, and that like stops the camera from like moving around dynamically, I think. But I mean, even with that, they still figured it out. So
Yeah, that's like in Zelda. If you run left with Link, the camera will start turning left. If you run right, it'll turn right. So that's why they almost always have to have the target active throughout a
Yeah.
majority of the run. Kingdom Hearts had the thankfulness of you can turn auto camera off, and so then you
Yeah.
can either have it follow you, which is better for casual players, I'd imagine, but for playing blindfolded, the fact that I can just turn that off and now I can hold left and not worry about the camera is very nice.
Yeah, I'm currently making another short explainer video, and this one's all about camera management. And I am going to talk about that. Like be sure you check all the options because some
Hmm.
games have this. You can like change it off in the settings, or like games have different camera controls, like the center camera button. Um, I use that all the time in Super Mario 64 DS. There's a camera button. If you just hold it, it locks the camera to right behind Mario. And if you like then walk forward into like you have an angled wall, let's say this is a top-down view, angled wall, Mario, the camera's facing this way. As soon as Mario hugs the wall, boom, you just lock on to perpendicular to the wall. So that's great, but the original Mario 64 doesn't have that exactly.
I think
It has
oh, I'm sorry.
it does have the lock cam though.
That's what I was gonna bring up is I feel like that tends to be like Bubsy's favorite example for cameras being funny for blindfolded speedruns is how like lock camera you'll probably never use casually in SM64, but then blindfolded Bubsy will utilize that for certain stars or certain coins or certain stuff to get through a level.
Just
Um,
happens to be the perfect tool and exists solely for blindfolded.
and then another example back to Kingdom Hearts, even though this isn't a Kingdom Hearts episode, but there are some reason the camera is weird, and when you go through a room, sometimes the next room's camera will be dependent on where your camera was in the last room. Sometimes the camera is always the same spot every single time you go in the room. And for whatever reason, there are some rooms that I have not figured out why, but the camera is just, I don't know if it's because the last room the camera tries to do the same, but because it didn't like that spot, it just flips it 180 degrees. And so I'll go in a room, and there's been some rooms that I went in 5 times, like practicing, and all 5 times when I went in that room, it was a different angle each time. And thankfully, it has a R3 option that just centers the camera. And then even in some rooms, doing R3, depending on what the camera was, it will either look at Sora or go behind Sora. And so I just mash R3 until it goes behind Sora. So that'll be some. Luckily, R3 is a thing in that game, so I don't have to worry about that. But that's why in some rooms when I walk in, I'll just be standing there mashing R3 to get it behind. Because luckily, Sora's always looking the same way every time he goes in a room. It's just the camera is so finicky.
Yeah, I think there's that we've had I mean just recently I had some issues very similar to that in Hazy Maze Cave in SM64 yesterday. Where like Mario, depending on how you go through the door or where the camera is when you go through the door, the results you get afterwards are not the same. So it's a it's a struggle, but like one of the things you have to be good at when routing and creating strategies is like just get good at like testing.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I do this, how like what is causing these different results? How can I create an experiment to test things? It's very scientific in in a way. I had someone in my Discord server start a discussion recently talking about is blindfolded gaming more of an art or a science? And I don't know. I think at times it becomes kind of scientific actually, which is cool.
I think the learning
Um,
process is scientific, and then your final product is the art for everyone.
Yeah, it's kind of a work of art, but at the same time, it's like I'm not exactly trying to express myself.
No.
I'm creating these strategies out of necessity. So it's more like solving a puzzle, which we can consider it art. It is, I know, like tassing, sometimes like they're trying to create the fastest possible way to do something. But sometimes people make tasks just to like show what they're capable of making and make something that looks flashy and cool. So it's kind of an art form in itself. So I don't know, I think blindfolded gaming is a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I like doing it. It's like there's like the puzzle solving aspect, and then there's the actual execution of doing the strategy, which is something that other puzzles don't have. Like Sudoku, you solve the puzzle and then you're done. You don't have to be good at writing the numbers. You don't have to be good at writing the numbers. Whereas blindfolded gaming, you have to be good at executing your solution. So you get the same joy out of doing like speedrunning, while also it's like really rewarding, like not seeing your not seeing your
Mm-hmm.
strategies, but hearing your strategies work.
Yeah, that's the best part is hearing it work. Or when it fails of something that you thought worked consistently and then you find out what made it fail and now you're even more consistent at it. And for me, and like I've said before, what gets me into speedrunning is just finding another way to play a game that I enjoyed. And most of the time I always learn something new. Like again, for example, Kingdom Hearts, I beat that casually a dozen times as a kid, and I thought I knew it super well. And then I go looking up speed runs of the game, and they're doing things that I didn't even know you could do in the game. Uh, and I was like, oh. And here I thought I knew a lot about it, and then going into blindfolded speed runs of Kingdom Hearts, I thought I knew a lot, and then I'm still discovering new things. I'm like, at this point, I've just accepted I'm never gonna know everything about this game that I really like. And there's always something new to learn that makes me enjoy the game even that much more.
Thank goodness for the visual speedrunners, to be
Hmm.
honest. Like I in like people who are like computer smart and they like break down code and figure out these glitches, and yeah, like I don't think I would be, I mean, at least not currently. Maybe if I specifically studied like that kind of stuff. But currently, I don't think I have interest in trying to be like a glitch hunter or a visual speedrunner. But because of all the work they do, it makes writing blindfolded games
Hmm.
a lot more doable.
Yeah, I definitely use the routes of the visual run for Kingdom Hearts for routing like equipment, abilities, how to handle boss fights. Nintendo World Championship, if there was a certain level that was giving me trouble, I went to the visual speed runs, and I not every one of the levels that I had trouble with did I find something, but there was a couple, especially for Donkey Kong NES. I saw how they did it, and it was like, oh, that I don't know why I didn't think about that, and then it just made it a lot easier to tackle some of those levels.
And the Nintendo World Championship, I haven't played it, but it sounds really cool. Like you have to have like you have to be prepared for such diverse challenges.
Hmm. It's a very fun speed run game with it's basically 13 NES titles broken down into mini speedrun levels with a total of 156 levels, and most of them you can do each level in less than 30 seconds. So then it's just like quick, rapid, quick, quick, quick. uh and I had a lot of fun with it just because it had Zelda 1, which is my favorite NES game. You had multiple Mario games which are fun, Kirby's Adventure, and it let me in a weird way dip my toe into trying those games blindfolded to see if I could do any of those potentially blindfolded outside of Nintendo World Championship. I think Excitebike I could do because it's incredibly easy. You just have to memorize a few spots to not crash in. Donkey Kong NES, I beat uh, in Nintendo World Championship and took what I learned from that and became the first person to beat the NES version of it blindfolded, despite it being a 40-plus-year-old game. And Kirby's Adventure, I think, has a lot of audio cues to make it a viable game. Uh, but it's not one that I'm willing to put the time into, or at least not yet. But I think that has potential for someone to beat Kirby's Adventure blindfolded. And then Super Mario Brothers 1, I think there's like 5 or more people who's actually beaten that blindfolded. But again, I'm not taking the time to
Yeah,
learn that.
I actually might learn SMB1 at some point. It's, I mean, a relatively short speed run
Hmm.
for any percent, so maybe I could take the time to do that. But that's the biggest problem is so many games, so many projects that interest me, and
Hmm.
we're all limited with time, and I try to make time for the like instrument multitasking stuff too. I also try to make time just to play games normally still,
Hmm.
cause that's what the joy all came from. Like I still you still gotta just enjoy the games because I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't do that
Agreed.
first.
Yeah, finding time is definitely difficult for me. Full-time job, wife, kids, also wanting to do my own things. Like I enjoy playing chess on the side. I always find something new to do for fun. Like I do Rubik's puzzles for fun. I'll do other things, and then like you said, trying to find time to do casual games. I also like watching TV shows, movies, and then also to
Yep.
find time for. I pretty much just stopped doing normal speed runs, and I'm just full focus on blindfolded because I've been having a lot more fun with that. But then trying to find time to do blindfolded speed runs, practice, and then the runs themselves. It's time management and just me being too busy all the
Yeah.
time.
And I think that's a great takeaway because like I mean, you can have a really busy life, but you can still do blindfolded gaming. A lot of
Mhm.
people they immediately jump to, "Oh, this must take years and years of experience," which big misconception. All you got to do is create a good strategy
Mhm.
and be good at executing that strategy. Um, and there's also like there's no pressure to do a full game speed run.
Mhm.
You can you can just do it one level or like take your time with projects. I'm all about that. I will start routing something. Like even right now, I'm still learning like I'm routing levels for New Super Mario Bros. Wii, and now we have more people in the community actively doing it. So we've all been like kind of motivating each other to like divide and conquer the game. Like, here, I'll try to route this level, you can route that level, and we're all like contributing to route the full game. And then, like, I'm not retaining all of that. I'm just doing a level here and there just for
Mhm.
fun. Just like takes a little bit of time, usually less than an hour to route a game, to route a level. And then over a long period of time, everything's going to be routed like a full category, and all I have to do is learn all the strategies. Like, so, like, if you aren't interested in doing a full game speed run, you can just do levels for fun, and like maybe that's your thing. You just like doing like only one level, and then you forget the strategy. You don't have to cram, and then perhaps you do want to do route a full game. You do all these little segments, and then next thing you know, the whole thing's routed. If you
Mhm.
just break it up, take small steps.
And whenever I got into trying it, I thought it was going to be one of those where I would have to practice and practice and practice like dozens of hours, but then it just felt like another speed run where you're completely new, you're doing it for the first time, but after you've done it a couple times, it just stays with you, and it's surprisingly, I'd say surprisingly easier to do than I expected. It's still obviously more difficult than learning a game blindfolded, but it's almost, or learning a speed run, but it's pretty much the same concept of you're completely new. You're gonna fail. You're gonna be slow. But the more you do it, it's just progressively gets easier. And I think for blindfolded speedruns, it's also easier if you're doing a game that you're more familiar with. So like Kingdom Hearts, while it's this big game, it's a game that I've played a lot, and so I already have like a lot of the maps in memory, and I already had the concept of the order of tasks that needed to be done in the game. So then it's just figuring out how to do it blindfolded versus Celeste, me going in completely, almost completely new because I actually haven't beaten that game before. It just looked fun to do, and even that I thought was going to be a challenge to memorize 20 rooms for chapter 1, 30 rooms for chapter 2, but it's just I did it a few times and I'm like, oh, okay, I already got a good grasp of what I need to do. I
Yeah.
just need to do it better.
Repetition, repetition does the trick, and it's not like it's not the same as like memorizing stuff for a test
Hmm.
where you're just cramming information. Uh, there's the physical act of doing the strategy, the movements that helps your brain remember. Like you're physically doing it. You're if we could study tests like we do blindfolded gaming, we'd all be acing history.
Yeah, no kidding. Real quick, because we haven't touched on it, but I did want to bring it up. You've done multiple marathons, such as Shine in the Dark. You actually got to do 2 runs for that one of
Yes.
New Super Mario Brothers Wii and Super Mario 64 DS. And those both were blindfolded because the Shine in the Dark was a blindfolded marathon by the community. And then you also got to participate in an awesome game, some quick 2025 with piano percent, where you played the piano matching to the music and some sound effects of New Super Mario Brothers Wii as you beat it with your head and feet. And I think what I found even more impressive about that run was one, you doing it on the big stage, which I know a lot of people can get nerves and make them
Yeah.
a little more difficult to play. But you were also playing with, I think you had mentioned input lag. So now you're
Yeah.
trying to focus on input lag while focusing on the music that you're playing. And that's where I thought that would have been left off of your multitasking, but then you're also listening and replying to your commentators while focusing on the input lag, playing the game with your head and feet and playing the music. I'm like, this is this is just super flexing of multitasking.
But when you put it like that, yeah, it sounds like a lot. One thing about the input lag, it was weird. I've had issues like that before in the past, but I've been able to fix it over time. At GDQ, I couldn't really fix it in time. And it's weird because it's specifically the motion controls were slightly delayed. The buttons were fine. The buttons, there was no input delay. And most of the time it wasn't a problem because I was just like blindfolded, like when doing beat count. I'm just holding right and doing the jumps. I'm timing the jumps. It's mainly when I was changing directions that it affected me. So levels like 5 Tower, it's a vertical level. So moving left and right has a lot of direction changes. So, but overall, like, yeah, it was GDQ was a thrilling experience. And surprisingly, the audience was the least of my worries. Like, there was a lot of people. And I come from a background of being quite an introvert. So
Yeah.
it was crazy. But like what I was doing was already like such a crazy task. Um, so I had an excuse for being bad at or for making lots of mistakes, for not playing the game great. So like it makes sense. I'm playing the way I'm playing, not perfect. So I had no worries of like my performance. I was just a little worried about the input delay making the run go over my estimate, but luckily it was around 40 minutes. I think funny thing, the GDQ run was slower than my first run I ever did.
No, I think it
And it
was.
was because of the delay for sure.
Mhm. And even with that, it from watching it, it didn't even feel like you made too many mistakes, and it sounded like the commentators, the host, and the crowd was having fun, especially on I think it's like 8-2 or 8-7, whichever one's the roller coaster level. Everyone just
Yeah.
yelling "we" for like 5 whole minutes.
Yeah, I'm
And
glad everyone was able to, especially the commentators and the host, they were able to entertain the crowd because I was so locked in at that point.
and then the Bowser
Um,
stage looked the scariest. There was like multiple times it looked like you were about to die, and you just kept surviving. I'm like, this this is what I like about watching speedruns, when it looks like those tense moments, and you just kept doing it over and over while playing the music. It was just very impressive, and I'm not just saying this because you're here right now. Your run is in my top 5 favorite GDQ runs that I've ever watched.
Thank you.
And
Yeah,
I
I
also like reading the comments where a lot of people commented saying that they thought it was going to be a run where you were playing with the piano. And then when they started watching the run, they realized, oh no, you're playing the piano while playing with your hidden feet. And they all commented that they liked that way more than the idea of playing it with a piano.
yeah. The instruments as controllers is still really cool.
Hmm.
If the piano was a controller, it's in my opinion, using a piano as a controller, it's just a bunch of buttons, really. Not too different from a controller. But I've seen people like same GDQ actually. Uh we had someone doing saxophone, electric saxophone as a controller. And that's different because like you're limited to what notes you can play.
Hmm.
Oh, not only I mean you have a pretty decent range on the saxophone, but you can't play multiple notes at the same time. Um, unless you're doing multiphonics, but that's you can't do that on an electric saxophone. So that that limitation changes how you're gonna play the game. Or like I've seen someone use it. We got CZR drums doing the drum set controller, right? That control thing is gonna limit how you play the game. The limitations shape how you play the game. I've seen someone use a guitar as a controller. You can only play one note at a time on each string. And then I've even also done some like any controller challenge doesn't have to be an instrument. I got my Wii Fit board back there, Wii Balance board. I've played a couple games like New Super Mario Bros. And New Super Mario Bros. Wii using only a Wii Fit board. And I can't lie, that was one of the most difficult things I've done. That's harder than playing the piano at the same time or blindfolded. And the best thing about that was like it doesn't take much preparation. You just kind of go in and try to play. Um, Same thing I talked about earlier with Mario Kart, the custom controls. Because of the custom controls, you're limited to what you can do. Even now with the foot controller, I can drift and I can use items whenever I want, but I don't have the ability to brake when I play Mario Kart. And taking a look at like 200cc, if I can't brake, making some of those turns is kind of impossible. But that's where strategically bumping into walls comes into play, or like you can do hops to start drifting. If you hop multiple times in the same direction, you slow down a lot. So I started using techniques that aren't typically used in order to allow me to play better in that context. And with blindfolded gaming, the limitation of not being able to see, that opens up an entirely new world. So limitations are great.
At the end of your GDQ run, you also decided to do, I think it was the first level, blindfolded while playing the piano at the same time. In case like everything you were already doing wasn't multitasking enough, you had to do one more thing. and I thought that
Yep.
was a very cool thing that you got to do. Not only because uh, it was something new, blindfolded on the GDQ. I don't think anyone's played a level of a game while blindfolded and playing an instrument before. But also, just I always like if anytime someone gets to like show off anything blindfolded on a big stage, whether it's like a single level or a whole entire game. And so I thought that was cool that Mario 60, new Super Mario Wii had a little bit of a taste of a blindfolded right there on
Yeah,
the
and
big stage.
that was before I actually decided to look into Blindfolded Mario Bros. Wii. As soon as I do something new, especially like people know me for the piano multitasking or the blindfold. Anytime I do the other thing, all the people who know me from the other thing are like, okay, now do this blindfolded, or like, now do this with that. Like, there's so many ways to combine different things. There's so many possibilities, and at some point, you just have to like, you have to pick and choose because we're limited with time.
Mhm.
Um, Endless possibilities, even with just one game.
And I think my the final question I can think of that I like asking for these blindfolded videos is if you had to rank New Super Mario Brothers Wii on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being easy, 5 to being like incredibly hard, what difficulty level would you give New Super Mario Brothers Wii blindfolded?
Only because some of the levels require beat counting for a lot of it, at least right now. I would say it's around a 3 or a 4. I am actively trying to make some more beginner friendly strategies, but there is a lot of beat counting because there's just really isn't another realistically good way to conquer some of the levels. But despite that, there are options for the beat counts. Like for 5 Tower, the whole level is just one long beat count basically because the spiky walls are silent and they move on cycles. Um, we have a beginner strategy, an intermediate strategy, and an advanced strategy. For a lot of levels, there are options, and I think the more and more I improve the strategies, the easier and easier it gets because I care a lot about making the strategies not just like consistency matters most. So consistent, fast,
Mm-hmm.
and easy. Finding a good balance of the difficulty, consistency, and speed is what I try to do. And although the beat count might be kind of hard to learn, once you learn it, that beat count, it works great. Like once you put in the work to learn it, you're not going to have to relearn it. It's designed to give you the most chances of winning. So I'd say a 3 or a 4. Very recently we just had person number 2, Dylan, become the second person ever to beat the game blindfolded, and we've got a couple more people who are gonna follow. And like at the very least, if you don't want to do a full game speed run, just learning a few levels, like you're more than capable of doing it, or helping create strategies for levels that haven't been done. We are always looking for more people to join us and help. And there's also a bunch of other 2D Mario games. New Super Mario Bros. U, New Super Luigi U, New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, New Super Mario Bros. On the DS, New Super Mario Bros. 2 on the 3DS. All of these games have been barely touched for blindfolded. So, like, I think some levels might be harder than others, but there's plenty of levels that are quite easy if you make a strategy that is easy. So, definitely get into it if you're interested.
Hello, everyone, to this post, I guess, video talk. I apologize for the interruption of the Behind the Mask video. Unfortunately, the last 8 to 10 minutes of the video and audio for some reason no longer exist on the video itself. It shows that it recorded in the video editing process, so I thought everything worked fine, but when it got to those last 8 or so minutes, for some reason there's just no video or audio and I don't know what happened. So what I'm gonna do here is my best attempt of summarizing everything that Wes and I talked about in those final moments. Do note that it's been a couple weeks since I recorded that with him, so I may forget some things and I apologize. Starting with after Wes speaks about other 2.5D Mario games, I guess we can call them, games that have yet to be done blindfolded. I did mention that Super Mario Wonder has been done blindfolded, both 80% and I believe 100% by Jackal. And Wes had commented something along the lines of how impressive it was for a newer game like that to already have been beaten blindfolded, as well as it being done with a 100% run. The next thing afterwards is I asked him something along the lines of, are there any final tips that we have briefly talked about or haven't talked about during the recording that he would like to give to anyone new to blindfolded speedrunning? And he mentioned something along the lines of use your resources, such as reach out to community members, whether it's the visual runners or the blindfolded runners, for any questions that you have. Also, watching runs, whether it's any percent or whatever category you're interested in, or if there are any blindfolded runs of that game, watch those runs as well. So just use your resources as well, and I completely agree with that. There's a lot of communities who are more than willing to answer any questions that you have and are eager to help newer runners get into their games as well. The next thing was to make sure that he got the proper shout out. So I asked him where is a good place for people to find him. And the best place would be his website, as it has all the links to his accounts, his Funkopotamus website. So you can then quickly find his YouTube, his Twitch, his TikTok, his Discord, so on. I'll leave a link to his website in the description below. And then it was the final moments where I thanked him for being on here. He thanked me for inviting him, and probably shared some final quick thoughts that I unfortunately don't remember. And hopefully this is the only time something like this occurs where I don't need to do a post video video. But for those who have watched, I hope you enjoyed, and I do plan on making more behind the mask videos after this, and hopefully I can keep improving on these, and like I said, hopefully nothing like this happens again. So for those who watch, I hope you enjoyed. Good luck to everyone that needs it.